After suffering a series of disastrous defeats at the hands of General Grievous, the Republic's foothold in the Outer Rim is in jeopardy. Commissioned to protect the strategic world of Bothawai, Anakin Skywalker and his weary battle group are all that stands between the system and domination by the Droid Army.
Greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Question mark? Welcome to the 31st droid-defined episode of Mando Vision. Nargai Tom, thank you so much for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. We are off to a really smooth start so far. Remember, the best way to reach out to this podcast is via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Please be sure to like, subscribe, share the show with all the other Mandalorians in your coverts. You know, IG units, Trendoshans, Wookiees. Let's share it with everybody. If possible or so inclined, you know what? We need those sweet 5-star reviews. They make the show go around and put a smile on my face every time I find one. They also help small independent podcasts like us stand out and not get lost in the shuffle. So please head over to our parent website. You can also head over to our parent website, 3bzine.com, and check out the other shows of the 3bzine network, like Beer Night in San Diego, the Tomcast Popcast, a pop culture podcast, and this Star Wars show, Mando Vision. We also have a store MV page with sweet merch from all 3 shows. Be sure to check those out. All right, let's kind of get it started. All right, we're diving back into our Clone Wars episode. But before we do that, I wanted to mention something real quick. Now, this is the first episode that we are recording after the termination of firing, whatever you want to call it, of Gina Carano as Cara Dune. And as of this recording, well, like I said, it just happened, but you're going to hear the show's a little bit out of order. So, the previous episode, I didn't mention any of this. That's just because it was ready ahead of time. So, you'll listen to Bantha Tracks, then episode 30, then 31, and that's where we are now. And Gina Carano has been fired. And one of the things I didn't mention in the Bantha Tracks episode that I kind of wanted to underline here a little bit is, here at Mandovision, myself in particular being the main person involved on this podcast, I appreciate and I welcome all sorts of diverse opinions and trains of thought. And I think Star Wars is a fun place to have fun conversations with people who don't necessarily see Star Wars the way that you do. It leads to all kinds of fun conversations and discussions and you understand a person's fandom, and you also understand a little bit better your own fandom for Star Wars. That being said, if I ever were in a discussion with a person, and I didn't agree with their opinion on Star Wars, that's fine. And they don't have to agree with my opinion on Star Wars. These are okay things. But where you have to pause and reconsider is, if I were to say something to someone, and my opinion and my beliefs of that opinion were then hurtful to that person, that is when you must pause and reevaluate what you were saying and what you were doing and what you were thinking. Because I think anytime that you are, whether intentional or not, if you're hurting other people, you need to pause and reevaluate yourself and look at why that's happening, and not just say, that person's overly sensitive, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And that's kind of where I want to be. It's okay to be different, to have different ideas and different opinions, and we don't have to live in this homogenized society where everyone thinks the same thing. That's it's okay to think some different things, as long as they're not crazy and hateful and hurtful. I guess that's what I'm getting at. If you're hurting people with some of your thoughts and beliefs, that's when you must pause and look inward and think, why are the words that I'm saying hurtful? And try to understand and grow and evolve and change and understand and sympathize and empathize with that person who has been affected by the words you said. I say that as a person who has put his foot in his mouth more than once on more than one occasion. and I'd like to think that I've grown to be a better person because of it. But what do I know about that? So that's all I'm going to say about that. So let's get into the episode proper. We're here to discuss Season 1, Episode 6 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. This is Downfall of a Droid, directed by Rob Coleman, written by George Christic. It originally aired September 7th, 2008, excuse me. And you know what? Before we dive into the episode, we have to do something really important first. I think you all know what it is by now. It's time to strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Congratulations, Anakin. Your resourcefulness always amazes me.
Thank you, Master.
You look troubled.
I lost R2 in the field.
Well, R2 units are a dime a dozen. I'm sure you'll find a suitable replacement.
I could take a squad out there, track him down.
Anakin, it's only a droid. You know attachment is not acceptable for a Jedi.
It's not just that, Master. How do I put this? I didn't wipe R2's memory.
What? He's still programmed with our tactics in base locations? If the Separatists get a hold of him, what possessed you not to erase that droid's memory?
Master Obi-Wan, sometimes R2 having that extra information has come in handy.
Well, then find that droid, Anakin. Our necks might very well depend on it.
Right away, Master.
All right, here we go. As I said before, Season 1, Episode 6, Downfall of a Droid. Once again, written by George Christic and directed by Rob Coleman. Original air date, November 7th, 2008. Let's talk about this episode's main voice cast. Once again featured prominently Matt Lanter as Anakin Skywalker, Ashley Eckstein as Ahsoka Tano, Matthew Wood as General Grievous in the Battle Droids. We get Ron Perlman as Ga Necht, the Trandoshan Salvager. We get James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, D. Bradley Baker as the Clone Troopers and Captain Rex, and of course Tom Kane as our narrator. So this is, let's go ahead and just read the episode description. I think you got a pretty good idea of what we're talking about from that clip we used to open the segment. Anakin must find the missing R2-D2 before the Separatists discover the Jedi military secrets locked in his memory banks. So a pretty straightforward episode, and this is part one of a two-part droid-centric episode. And if I remember correctly, I liked the second part more, but we'll get to that later. And it's a solid enough episode. Don't get me wrong. Our Jedi fortune cookie for this episode is trust in your friends, and they'll have reason to trust you. Pretty straightforward, I think, as well. So Anakin, despite a suggestion from Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka to fall back, has actually laid a trap for General Grievous. And as the Separatist battle cruisers, they work their way past this asteroid field. They fall into the trap because Anakin has planted tanks on the far side of these asteroids, so they will be able to flank the Separatist cruisers. And I thought it was a pretty sweet plan. Anakin, not much of a sharer, apparently, with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka, as he just allows them all to believe that falling back is the best idea. But Rex in the 501st, obviously very dialed in to General Skywalker and what he wants, and they're able to lay waste to the Separatist forces that have come to eliminate them. But not before Anakin has one of his own battle cruisers destroyed, and more egregious loss of clone life in the Clone Wars. It's a sad day for clones in this episode, as many of them get shot down in the process before Anakin's plan comes to fruition. And I think that probably is my only criticism in this episode, is that Anakin is a bit not wasteful necessarily, but a lot of clones seem to die unnecessarily in the lead up to this battle plan of Anakin's, and he doesn't seem all that fazed by it necessarily, because he believes in his plan. There's a little bit of Anakin's overconfidence, a little bit of hubris on his part. He knows the plan will work, and but maybe he could have done it without getting so many clones killed. It would be my thought, but I guess Anakin is much more into the result at this point. It's interesting to note in this episode that apparently this episode was designed to air earlier in the run. I think this was originally supposed to be like episode 2 of the series and take place before the Malevolence trilogy happened. So I think that may account for some of the differences in Anakin's approach to battlefield tactics and things like that. because obviously we just saw him be more adapting and regretful of losing life in that Malevolence trilogy. So I think we kind of, there's a little bit of a discrepancy there when you view these episodes in order, and I think that becomes apparent. And you see a little bit of that with Ahsoka too. I don't think to the same extent as you do with Anakin, but there is a difference here. So as the Separatist battlecruisers are being destroyed, Anakin pursues a fleeing General Grievous, and but Grievous is the master of escaping in the Star Wars universe, and we'll get a lot of General Grievous narrowly escaping the Jedi over the course of this series. But in the process, he badly damages Anakin's starship, and when Anakin awakens, after being rendered unconscious from his ship spiraling out of control towards the meteor field, we find out that R2-D2 is gone and he could not be recovered. And that's when we get the scene that we just played here, where Anakin has to admit to Obi-Wan that R2-D2, he doesn't wipe his memories. So a lot of really important, a lot of vital Republic military data is in R2's head. And maybe getting him back is a good idea after all. I'm going to be honest. I generally like. I am a big Obi-Wan Kenobi fan. I did not care for Obi-Wan's tone in that conversation about how astromechs are a dime a dozen, and attachment is forbidden. I get the attachment is forbidden part. That's very Jedi lore-ish. But I mean, at this point, shouldn't Obi-Wan have some sort of relationship with R2-D2 as well? And again, I understand attachment is forbidden, but that little droid's been pretty damn helpful to you too, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So maybe, show a little bit more understanding when it comes to your former Padawan's feelings towards the droid. But again, that's I guess that's also part of the contrast between Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So Anakin gets permission to mount a rescue mission, try to recover R2-D2. Obviously for the military secrets, but also because, let's be honest, he's Anakin's friend. Well, we shouldn't say R2-D2 has a male connotation to it. Let's just say R2-D2 is Anakin's friend, and he wants to recover his friend because, hey, they have a great relationship, let's be perfectly honest. But in the process of this, as Anakin prepares to mount his rescue attempt with Ahsoka Tano, he's also assigned a new droid to help pilot his ship, R3 S6. Nicknamed Goldie by Ahsoka, and then later nicknamed Stubby by Anakin. If you don't feel that something's fishy with this droid, I mean, let's be honest. Maybe you find out he's a bit of a goof the first time around, but later by this episode, if you don't know what's going on, you are not paying much attention to how this show's working so far. Which actually brings up a fairly interesting question. It would seem to me that if the Separatists, the vast majority of their army is a droid army, which means they're controlling huge amounts of droid making facilities and factories of all sorts, and because they have droids of all manners, all designs. Now, obviously, we haven't seen that many astromechs in the sway of the Separatist army, but wouldn't you imagine that it wouldn't be that far out of reach, that complicated of a plot for the droid army to somehow infiltrate these other droid making factories that are making R2 units and astromechs and the droids that are used by the Republic, and subvert their programming or install subroutines and complicated things to help achieve their goals. And now we'll get a little bit more of that sort of stuff later on in the show. And again, I think this was supposed to be the second episode of the series, basically. So this was something they weren't diving into yet. This was supposed to be like our first introduction into some of the treachery of the Separatist army, of the droid army, of General Grievous. But it's just one of those things, especially after I've watched it. Oops, sorry, that was my door creaking there. After watching this episode a couple different times, it's just one of those things, like, sometimes the Jedi are just blissfully unaware of how easy it is to infiltrate and to, droids don't lie necessarily, but their programming allows them to, to fulfill their mission parameters using deception if necessary. We saw it in the movie. So it's just one of those things that Jedi don't seem to think sometimes, and we will definitely talk about that later on as the show progresses. So we have R3. He's painted gold and black, which are colors I don't care for. And if anyone knows me in real life, you probably know why. So we won't talk about that too much. But we'll move on. So eventually they get out to the field. Anakin finds his ship. R2 is missing. They continue to search the asteroid field, and they find a ship salvaging the battle wreckage. And they just, Anakin and Ahsoka pose as buyers of an R2 unit. So they go to the salvager looking for their R2 unit. This is where we meet our Trandoshan character, voiced by Ron Perlman. This is a Trandoshan very different than Trandoshans we've met in the past. Mostly at this point, we're familiar with Bosk and the more bounty hunter, athletic type of Trandoshans. And this one, kind of the opposite of that. A little bit of a schlubby guy. Maybe makes poor dietary choices. But, salvaging probably doesn't lead to a lot of opportunities to get to the gym and get real ripped up like Bosk is. But, what are you going to do? So he's interested, this Trandoshan dealer is interested in acquiring money from these buyers. And obviously, he's going to try and kill them and take their money and dump their buys into space. I think Anakin is aware of this, but he also wants to make sure that R2 is not on board this ship. So this is where we come across this salvager. He's got himself a couple of IG units, a couple of assassin droids in this guy's possession. And it's pretty neat to watch the combat scene that breaks out when R3 quote unquote accidentally activates the assassin droids, and then they come after Ahsoka and Anakin. Again, I liked the scene. I thought it was a fun action scene. I think this was one of the first times we got to see the possibility of the IG units and their versatility and their agility, their surprising agility in this animated form. I don't think. Well, let me put it this way. It doesn't live up to what we saw with IG-11 in season 1 of The Mandalorian, but I think this was probably like the first step in realizing the sort of wild murderous potential of the IG assassin droids, so pay attention to some of the movements, because we see some of the stuff come around that we see IG-11 do in season 1 of Mando, but not quite to the extent and not with the speed with which IG-11 operated in The Mandalorian, which I thought was the key to why IG-11's combat was much more impressive. The speed with which he did these moves, the rapidity of the actions, so good. I'm getting chills just thinking about IG-11 and the way he kicked all the booty. But it's Anakin and Ahsoka. They're able to dispatch these droids pretty quickly with their lightsabers. And then the Trandoshan, we find out, surprise, surprise, that there's more going on here than we expected. So let's go ahead and listen to that scene right now, okay?
You'll be sorry you ever came aboard my ship, Jedi. I'm about to make your life miserable.
What is it?
I am en route to the rendezvous point, General. I've got the merchandise you're looking for.
Which is R2-D2.
It must be valuable. A Jedi came looking for it. Maybe it is worth more than we negotiated.
Don't push me, Slime. You bring that R2 unit to me as fast as you can get here, or else.
Ah, yes. Of course, General. Just kidding.
Oh, sad R2. Sad R2-D2. So yeah, of course the Trandoshan was lying the entire time. He had a deal worked out with Grievous ahead of time. So even Anakin's deception was never going to work, because he was promised big mucho dinero from General Grievous, who I think we've established by this point that General Grievous is not trustworthy at all. So I'm not sure why his reputation hasn't preceded him more around. So what happens next? Well, this Anakin has to accept that R2 is gone, and it's time to move forward with the war effort. He's stuck with R3. Anakin's very angry about what happened, the triggering of the assassin droids. But for some reason, Ahsoka is able to talk him into giving the droid another chance. And listen, let's be honest, it doesn't go well. And if at this point, Anakin can only assume that R3 is grossly incompetent, which should have been enough of a warning. Because what happens next is, after a hyperspace jump, R3 triggers a homing beacon, a Jedi tracker, and that alerts General Grievous to Anakin's position, which puts Anakin in an ambush, and, well, that's how it works. Now, I should mention right before this scene, we did see R2 be very R2-D2. He knocks the restraining bolt off, and he attempts to escape and save himself and actually he disposes of an IG unit himself pretty cleverly, which I thought was a pretty fun scene before our transition salvager catches him and puts an end to that. And then we get to the scene with Anakin and R3. And again, by this point, if you haven't figured out that R3 is in league with the Separatists, you're not paying much attention to the details of this show, especially some of the actions, like the way R3 blows up the hyperdrive ring and all this stuff, and the way he's instantly triggered that homing device, or that Jedi tracker. I forget exactly the terminology they used on that. But luckily, Ahsoka and Rex come to the rescue. They're able to get Anakin and R3 out of there. And again, at least at this point, and I don't remember the exact details for the follow-up episode, but if Anakin's not at least suspicious by now of R3, then he is not as sharp as his lightsaber blade may let him believe he is. And then we kind of get to the end of the episode, and again, it's a good moment of the show, I think, as Anakin is bound and determined, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think I'll go ahead and play that for y'all right now.
Great! Now you hurt his feelings.
His feelings? What about R2? He's still out there. I know it.
And there we get our Jedi fortune cookie. Trust in your friends. And there you go. I'm going to play it before the music blasts us out into oblivion. But yeah, that is part one of our two-part R2-D2 adventure episode. And like I said, I remember really liking part two quite a bit more. But I haven't watched it yet. I haven't rewatched it yet. So we'll see if that holds up. But I'm a big fan of R2-D2, so I tend to think I will like it just fine. This episode, I gave it I wanted to give it a 6, but I bumped it up to 6.5 because it is R2-D2 based, and I just love that little droid. So that's where we're at with this one. Again, this was Season 1, Episode 6, Downfall of Droid, and we're going to do Part 2 in fairly quick order, so you'll be able to listen to these in fairly quick succession as we wrap up this little mini 2-part episode of Season 1 of the Clone Wars. And that's it. How are you guys enjoying this so far? Is there anything, do you want me to cover the shows differently? Do you want me to get into more depth with things? There's not much depth to get into just yet at this point in the series. But I promise we will get there. But if there's a different way you want me to explore stuff, I'm willing to listen. So here, you know how to get a hold of me. It's Mando_Vision on Twitter, on Instagram. And yeah, that's the main thing here. You know, again, if you can, share the show with all the friends, all the family, all the enemies. Share it with General Grievous and the other battle droids. That's fine by me too. And if you have the time, the sweet 5-star reviews help shows like us stand out and get noticed in the crowded podcast universe. And also remember too that we are on all your favorite podcasting platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and so many, many more. We are also part of the 3BZ network of podcasts. Head over to 3BZ.com, check out the other shows: Beer Night in San Diego, the Tomcast Popcast, a pop culture podcast, and Mando Vision. So yeah, that's the episode. We're wrapping it up. I did want to give you one more little bit of a tease for something upcoming on the show, but I think we will do a little bit of some book review episodes here coming up in the near future, because I am reading the what are they calling it? The High Republic series. And I've almost finished that first book. And I will definitely chime in with my opinion on things and maybe why or why not you'll enjoy it. And I mean, I'll tease you there so far. So far, I'm enjoying it. So we'll talk about more though. Those will be special Bantha Tracks episodes. They won't derail our Star Wars: The Clone War review episodes. And yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for today. The next episode is gonna be out real quick for part 2 of this droid mini epic with our favorite droid, our favorite astromech, R2-D2. So thank you all so much for listening. It means the world to me that you take the time to download the show and listen to it. And I can't thank you enough and show you the appreciation I have for all of you. So thank you again. Remember, there's only one way to close out the show. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.